In Millbrook, Pennsylvania, a desperate single mother unlocked the door to her last hope. A condemned Victorian house built atop bridge ruins. What started as a $47,000 gamble revealed a leather-bound journal hidden in the walls. Josephine Brown, an unemployed civil engineer, had no idea the discovery would expose a $290 million conspiracy. With her 16-year-old daughter Emma, she uncovered patent theft, corporate fraud, and a century-old cover-up that killed 12 people. What began as avoiding bankruptcy became a fight against a powerful construction conglomerate, threats, and a custody battle, proving some truths are worth risking everything to reveal. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The keys felt heavier than they should have in Josephine's hand. Cold metal against her palm, proof of ownership, or proof of the worst mistake she'd ever made. $47,000. Every cent she had left after the divorce, the layoff, the slow hemorrhaging of their old life into this new, unrecognizable one. The bridge house loomed before them, half Victorian elegance, half industrial ruin. The northern wall had been consumed by what remained of the Aldridge suspension bridge. Rusted iron cables thick as a man's thigh emerged from the brick like skeletal fingers, anchored in stone that had been crumbling since 1972. The effect was grotesque, as if the house and bridge were locked in some century-long struggle, neither willing to let go. "You've got to be kidding me." Emma's voice came from behind her, flat and exhausted. Josephine turned to see her daughter standing beside the U-Haul, arms crossed, her dark hair whipping across her face in the October wind. At 16, Emma had mastered the art of communicating volumes through silence. This particular silence said, "This is what we've come to. This is how far we've fallen." "It's structurally sound," Josephine heard herself say. The engineer in her, always assessing, always calculating load-bearing capacity and material stress. The foundation is solid. The bridge integration is actually fascinating from an architectural standpoint. Mom. Emma's eyes were red-rimmed, though whether from crying or from the 6-hour drive from Philadelphia, Josephine couldn't tell. "Stop. Just stop pretending this is something it's not." The words landed like a blow. Josephine felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the sensation that had become her constant companion since the layoff 8 months ago, since Marcus left, since everything that was supposed to be permanent revealed itself as temporary. She turned back to the house. Gray clouds hung low over Millbrook, Pennsylvania, making the Victorians' peeling paint look even more forlorn. Windows stared back at her like empty eye sockets. This was supposed to be their fresh start. Buy low, renovate, flip for profit. Use her engineering expertise to see potential where others saw ruin. It had sounded reasonable in her studio apartment at 2 a.m., laptop open to real estate listings, bank account dwindling. Now, standing in the overgrown driveway with dead leaves swirling around her ankles, it felt like surrender. "Let's at least look inside," Josephine said quietly, "before we decide anything." Emma's laugh was bitter. "Decide anything? We sold the furniture, Mom. We have nowhere else to go." Truth. Josephine climbed the front steps, testing each board before putting her full weight down. Engineer's habit. The porch groaned but held. The key turned reluctantly in the lock, and the door swung inward with a sound like a sigh. The smell hit her first. Mildew and dust and something else. The particular scent of abandonment, of a space that had forgotten what it meant to be inhabited. The entry hall stretched before them, once grand woodwork, now water-stained and warped. To the left, a parlor with a collapsed ceiling. To the right, what might have been a dining room, its wallpaper peeling in long strips like shed skin. Josephine stepped inside, her boots echoing on bare floorboards. She could see the bones of the house beneath the decay. High ceilings, original crown molding, the kind of craftsmanship that didn't exist anymore. And everywhere, evidence of the bridge's presence. Iron support beams integrated into the walls, cables disappearing into the ceiling. A strange hybrid of Victorian domesticity and industrial engineering. Jesus Christ. Emma stood in the doorway, backlit by gray afternoon light. People actually lived here? The listing said it was built in 1890 by the bridge engineer. Josephine moved carefully through the entry hall, her engineer's eye cataloging structural issues. Water damage here, possible foundation settling there. But nothing catastrophic. Nothing that couldn't be fixed. Jonathan Aldrich. He lived here while overseeing the bridge construction. And then what? The bridge fell down and he just stayed? The bridge partially collapsed in 1972, long after Aldrich was gone. Josephine ran her hand along the wall, feeling the texture of plaster beneath layers of peeling paint. The house has been empty since then, condemned, technically, until the county reassessed it 2 years ago. Emma moved past her, stepping carefully over a section of rotted floorboard. Despite her resentment, Josephine could see curiosity beginning to override anger. Emma had always been like that, unable to resist a mystery, a story waiting to be uncovered. They spent the next hour exploring. The kitchen was a disaster. Its sink rusted through, cabinets hanging at odd angles. The bathroom fixtures were ancient, stained with rust and mineral deposits. But upstairs, the damage was less severe. For bedrooms, their floors solid, their windows intact. Josephine claimed the largest for herself. Emma chose one overlooking what must have once been a garden. At least the roof doesn't leak up here, Emma offered. The first thing close to optimism she'd spoken all day. The last room they examined was a study at the end of the hallway. Smaller than the others, with built-in bookshelves and a bay window offering a view of the bridge ruins. The afternoon light slanted through dusty glass, illuminating dancing motes in the air. Emma moved to the window while Josephine examined the shelves. Empty now, but she could imagine them filled with engineering texts, technical manuals. She ran her fingers along the wood, noting the craftsmanship. Whoever built this had cared about details. Mom! Something in Emma's voice made Josephine turn. Her daughter was kneeling by the wall beside the window, her hand pressed against the wainscoting. This panel. It's loose. Josephine crossed to her, crouching down. Emma was right. The wooden panel moved under pressure, not from decay but as if it had been designed to do so. A hidden compartment, maybe. Not uncommon in houses this old. Careful, Josephine murmured. Though Emma was already working her fingers into the gap, the panel came free with a soft crack. Behind it, in the hollow space between wall studs, something waited. Emma reached in carefully, her arm disappearing into the darkness up to her elbow. When she withdrew her hand, she held a book. No, not a book. A journal. Leather-bound, its cover mottled with age and dust, tied shut with a leather cord that had stiffened to near brittleness. Emma set it carefully on the floor between them, and they both stared at it as if it might vanish. Should we open it? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Josephine's engineer's mind catalogued the risks. The binding could be fragile, the pages delicate with age. But her hands were already moving, carefully loosening the leather cord, opening the cover with the gentleness usually reserved for newborns. The first page held a single line of text, written in faded brown ink, the handwriting elegant and precise. The private journal of Jonathan Aldrich, engineered January 1890. Emma leaned closer, her shoulder touching Josephine's. The guy who built the bridge. The one who lived here. Josephine turned the page carefully. More text, dense and technical, describing load calculations and material specifications. But also something else, personal observations, fragments of a life. She read aloud, her voice steadier than she felt. They question my methods, these men who have never built anything that might outlast them. But I know what I've created. This bridge will stand for centuries, a testament to principles they're too short-sighted to understand. I have hidden my true work, the innovations they would steal if they knew their value. Let them think me a mere craftsman. Let them underestimate. The truth is in the stones, in the cables, in the very bones of this structure. And when the time comes, when someone with eyes to see discovers what I've left behind, they will understand that I was not the fool they believed me to be. The words hung in the dusty air between them. Outside, the wind picked up, making the old house groan. Josephine looked at Emma and saw her own wonder reflected back. This wasn't just an old journal. It was something more. A message, a puzzle, a secret kept for over a century. "There's more," Emma said, reaching back into the wall cavity. "I can feel something else back there." But Josephine's mind was already racing ahead, engineering training colliding with something she hadn't felt in months. Possibility. If Aldridge had hidden this journal, what else might he have hidden? And why? The house suddenly felt different. Not abandoned, waiting. And for the first time since she'd turned the key in the lock, Josephine wondered if maybe, just maybe, this disaster of a purchase might be something else entirely. Emma pulled out a rolled bundle of papers, tied with the same stiffened leather cord. Blueprint paper, Josephine realized immediately. Technical drawings. She took them with trembling hands, her heart hammering in her chest with something that felt dangerously close to hope. "Mom!" Emma's voice was different now. Excited. Alive in a way it hadn't been in weeks. "What is all this?" "I don't know," Josephine admitted. "But I think we need to find out." The journal lay open between them. Jonathan Aldridge's precise handwriting promising secrets, innovation, truth hidden in stone. Outside, the ruins of his bridge stood like a question mark against the darkening sky. And inside this crumbling house that had consumed every cent Josephine had left in the world, a mystery waited to be uncovered. For the first time since the layoff, since Marcus left, since rock bottom became their new address, Josephine felt something other than defeat. It was small, fragile, possibly foolish. But it was there. Felt like the beginning of something. Emma looked at her mother, and in that glance, Josephine saw a reflection of her own cautious hope. The resentment hadn't disappeared. The fear hadn't vanished. But for this moment, in this dusty study with a century-old journal between them, they were on the same side. Partners in discovery. "Let's bring the rest of our stuff inside," Josephine said finally. "And then we're going to read every word of this journal." Emma nodded, carefully gathering the papers. As they stood, the floorboards creaking beneath them, Josephine took one last look at the study. This room where Jonathan Aldridge had worked, planned, hidden his secrets. This room that had waited more than 100 years for someone to find what he'd left behind. The Bridge House had already given them more than she dared hope for. The question was, what else was it hiding? Marcus's hand hovered over the doorbell, hesitating. Through the front window of the Bridge House, he could see movement. Josephine, probably, navigating the disaster she'd bought with what remained of their shared past. He'd heard about the purchase through Emma, who'd mentioned it with the particular tone she used when discussing her mother's decisions. That careful neutrality that barely concealed judgment. He pressed the bell. Nothing. Of course not. The place probably hadn't had working electricity since the Nixon administration. Instead, he knocked. 3 sharp raps that echoed through what sounded like an empty space. A moment later, Josephine appeared, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dust streaking one cheek. She wore old jeans and a Penn State engineering sweatshirt he recognized from their marriage. The sight of it did something complicated to his chest. "Marcus." Her voice was flat, not surprised, not pleased, just stating a fact. "I was in the area. Thought I'd check on Emma." Josephine's expression didn't change, but he saw her hand tighten on the doorframe. "You were in Millbrook? For what exactly?" "Titan's got a project proposal for the county. Infrastructure assessment." Not entirely a lie. There was a proposal, though his presence wasn't strictly necessary. "Can I come in?" She stepped back without answering, which he took as permission. The entry hall was worse than he'd imagined. Water damage, peeling wallpaper, the smell of mildew strong enough to make his eyes water. But Josephine was already moving deeper into the house, and he followed. "Emma's upstairs," she said over her shoulder. "She's been researching the house's history, local archives, newspaper databases. You know how she gets when something catches her interest." He did know. Emma had inherited that particular intensity from both of them. Josephine's focus, his ambition. The combination could be formidable. They found Emma in what looked like it had once been a study, surrounded by papers and open books. Her laptop sat on a makeshift desk of stacked moving boxes. She glanced up when they entered, her expression shifting through several emotions too quickly for Marcus to parse. "Dad." "Hey, kiddo." He crossed to her, carefully avoiding a section of floor that looked questionable. "Your mom said you've been playing detective." Emma's eyes flicked to Josephine, then back to him. Something passed between mother and daughter, a silent communication that excluded him completely. It stung more than he wanted to admit. "Just local history," Emma said carefully. "The house has an interesting past." "I can see that." Marcus gestured at the papers spread across her workspace. Photocopies of old newspaper articles, hand-drawn maps, what looked like genealogical charts. "Find anything good?" Another glance at Josephine. This time, his ex-wife gave a slight nod. "The man who built this house was named Jonathan Aldridge," Emma began, warming to her subject the way she always did when explaining something she'd researched. "He designed the suspension bridge. It was considered revolutionary for its time, 1890s engineering that shouldn't have been possible with the technology they had." Marcus moved closer, genuinely interested despite himself. One article headline caught his eye: "Bridge Collapse Kills 12. The date was May 1891. "The bridge failed?" he asked. "A section of it collapsed during a dedication ceremony." Emma's voice took on that particular tone she used when reciting facts she'd memorized. 12 people died. Aldridge was blamed. His reputation was destroyed. He died 2 years later, officially from heart failure, but the articles from that time suggest he just gave up. "Tragic," Marcus said, meaning it, but his mind was already moving ahead, engineers training intersecting with business instinct. "What happened to his designs? His patents?" Josephine spoke before Emma could answer. "Why do you want to know?" He turned to face her, reading the suspicion in her eyes. "Just curious. It's interesting from an engineering history standpoint. You work in project management, Marcus, not engineering history." Fair point. He'd left hands-on engineering years ago, trading technical work for the better money in management. One of the many things Josephine had resented about him, though she'd never said it directly. "Mom found something," Emma said suddenly, and Josephine's sharp look made it clear this wasn't information she'd planned to share. "Documents, hidden in the walls." Marcus felt something shift in the room. The air seemed to thicken with tension he didn't fully understand. "What kind of documents?" "Journals," Josephine said, her voice carefully neutral. "Technical drawings. We're still going through them." "Can I see?" "No." The word was immediate, absolute. Marcus studied his ex-wife, noting the defensive set of her shoulders, the way she'd positioned herself slightly between him and Emma. Protecting something. But what? "Josephine. These belong to Aldridge. They're part of the house's history. I'm being careful with them. Not a lie, but not the whole truth either." He could tell. 15 years of marriage had taught him to read her silences as well as her words. "Fair enough." He kept his tone light, casual. "I'm just impressed you two found anything intact after all this time. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." Emma was watching him now with that too perceptive gaze she'd developed in the years since the divorce. Seeing through him the way Josephine always had. He felt exposed, caught in something he didn't fully understand yet. "The documents were well preserved," Josephine said. "Sealed compartments. Aldridge went to considerable effort to hide them." "Hide them from what?" "From who?" Emma corrected. "The articles mention a company called Hendrick Steel Consortium. They provided materials for the bridge. After the collapse, they claimed Aldridge's design was flawed, but Aldridge maintained the materials were substandard. There was a lawsuit, but Hendrick won. They had better lawyers, more money." Marcus felt a prickle of recognition. Hendrick. He'd heard that name recently. Where? Then it hit him. The Titan proposal for the county included a partnership with Hendrick Global Industries. Same company, evolved over a century into a construction empire. One of the biggest infrastructure firms on the East Coast. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his boss. "Need that site assessment by Friday." Counties pushing for decision. I should go, Marcus heard himself say. Let you two get back to your treasure hunt. He meant it as a joke, but neither of them smiled. Emma walked him to the door, and he took the opportunity to pull her aside in the hallway. You okay here? The house looks pretty rough. It's fine, Dad. Mom knows what she's doing. Does she? He kept his voice low. Emma, if you need anything, if you want to come stay with us for a while, I'm good. Her tone was final. Really? He wanted to push, to insist she had options beyond this crumbling house and whatever obsession Josephine was developing with old documents. But Emma was already pulling away, and he recognized the set of her jaw. Brown stubbornness. They all had it. As he walked back to his car, Marcus pulled out his phone and opened a new message to his boss. Need information on Hendrik Global. Their history, specifically 1890s operations. Any skeletons in closets? The response came within minutes. Why? Marcus looked back at the bridge house, at the rust-streaked remnants of Aldridge's failed dream jutting from the Victorian structure like broken bones. At the second-floor window where Josephine stood watching him, her expression unreadable. Just curious, he typed, then added, might be relevant to the county project. Another lie, or maybe not. He wasn't sure yet, but something about the way Josephine had positioned herself between him and those documents, the careful way Emma had measured her words, it all suggested they'd found something more than just historical curiosities. And if it was valuable, if it had anything to do with Hendrik Global, then Titan needed to know. The company paid him well. He owed them that much. He started the car, but before pulling away, he sent one more text. This one to Emma. Love you, kiddo. Call if you need anything. Her response came as he reached the end of the driveway. I will. Marcus knew she wouldn't. Not unless things got truly desperate. Emma was loyal to her mother in a way that both impressed and wounded him. He'd lost that loyalty 3 years ago when he'd chosen someone else over their family. As he drove back toward the highway, Millbrook disappearing in his rearview mirror, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just witnessed something significant. The beginning of something that would spiral beyond anyone's control. He thought about Jonathan Aldridge, driven to an early death by accusations and conspiracy. About Josephine, brilliant and stubborn, backing herself into a corner with that house purchase. About Emma, caught between parents who loved her but couldn't stop hurting each other. His phone buzzed again. His boss. Hendrik's lawyers are aggressive. Whatever you're thinking, be careful. Marcus deleted the message and kept driving. Behind him, in a condemned house full of secrets, his daughter and ex-wife were uncovering something that had been buried for over a century. Something that people had died to hide. He told himself he was just being cautious, protecting his interests, doing his job. But later, when he couldn't sleep, he'd remember the look in Josephine's eyes when he'd asked about the documents. Not just suspicion, fear. And he'd wonder if he'd just made a mistake that would cost more than he was willing to pay. The email from Dr. Evelyn Reyes arrived at 6:47 a.m., 3 minutes after Emma sent her inquiry. Emma was still in bed when her phone buzzed, the notification pulling her from dreams of collapsing bridges and hidden rooms. I can be there by noon. Don't show anyone else what you've found. We need to talk in person. Emma sat up, her heart hammering. She'd sent a carefully worded message the night before, asking about the Hendrik Steel Consortium and Jonathan Aldridge. She'd expected a polite response, maybe some bibliography suggestions. Not this. Josephine was already awake, working in the study. Emma found her mother surrounded by blueprint paper, the journals open across the makeshift desk. In the morning light streaming through the bay window, the documents looked even more fragile. The ink faded to the color of dried blood. Dr. Reyes is coming, Emma said without preamble. Today. She said not to show anyone what we found. Josephine's head snapped up. You contacted her? You said I could research. I said you could look into the history, not reach out to people. But Josephine's tone wasn't angry. Worried, maybe. Uncertain. What exactly did you tell her? Emma pulled up the email on her phone and handed it over. Josephine read quickly, her expression shifting through several emotions Emma couldn't quite identify. Professor Emeritus of Industrial History at State University, Josephine murmured, reading the email signature. She responded fast. Too fast. Maybe. Josephine set the phone down, her fingers returning to the journal in front of her. Or maybe she's been waiting for someone to ask these questions. They spent the morning cleaning. Not the whole house, that would take months, but the study and kitchen, making the spaces presentable enough for a visitor. Emma vacuumed while Josephine dealt with the worst of the water damage, setting up a space heater to combat the persistent chill that seemed to live in the walls. At 11:53, a silver Honda pulled into the driveway. Dr. Evelyn Reyes was smaller than Emma had imagined, barely 5 feet tall, her gray hair cut in a practical bob. She wore slacks and a cardigan despite the October cold, and carried a worn leather messenger bag that looked as old as the journals. But it was her eyes that struck Emma, sharp, assessing, the eyes of someone who'd spent a lifetime looking for things others missed. Josephine met her at the door. Dr. Reyes, thank you for coming. Show me. No pleasantries, no small talk. The historian's voice was crisp, urgent. Please, show me what you found. They led her to the study. Emma watched as Dr. Reyes approached the desk where the journals and blueprints lay spread out. The older woman stopped 3 feet away, as if afraid to get closer. Her hands were shaking. My God, she whispered. They're real. After all this time, they're actually real. Josephine moved beside her. You knew about these? I suspected. Dr. Reyes reached out, her fingers hovering over the nearest journal without quite touching it. May I? At Josephine's nod, she picked up the leather-bound volume with a reverence that bordered on religious. She opened it carefully, her eyes scanning the pages with a speed that suggested she knew exactly what she was looking for. The load calculations, she breathed. The cable suspension algorithms. This is decades ahead of its time. This is... Her voice broke. This is what they destroyed him for. Emma and Josephine exchanged glances. The historian's reaction was intense, personal in a way that went beyond academic interest. Dr. Reyes set the journal down and turned to face them. Her eyes were wet. I need to tell you something. 30 years ago, I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the Hendrik Steel Consortium. Their business practices in the late 19th century, specifically their pattern of patent acquisition and competitor elimination. I had evidence, circumstantial but compelling, that they'd built their empire through systematic theft and sabotage. She moved to the window, staring out at the bridge ruins. My dissertation was blocked. Not failed, blocked. The committee refused to allow me to defend it. No explanation, just administrative delays that stretched for months, then a quiet suggestion that I choose a different topic. When I refused, my funding was pulled. My advisor stopped returning my calls. Within a year, I was essentially blacklisted from serious academic work. Josephine's voice was quiet. The Hendrik family? I could never prove it. But yes, I believe so. Dr. Reyes turned back to them. Their lawyers are legendary. Their reach is extensive. And they have a very long memory for anyone who threatens their legacy. Emma felt cold. But that was 30 years ago. They can't still. Hendrik Global Industries is worth billions. Dr. Reyes interrupted gently. Built on patents and innovations allegedly developed by the founder's great-great-grandfather. If proof emerged that those innovations were actually stolen from Jonathan Aldrich, that the entire empire was built on fraud and murder. Murder! Josephine's voice was sharp. Dr. Reyes moved back to the desk, picking up one of the blueprint papers. The bridge collapse killed 12 people. Aldrich maintained until his death that the design was sound, that Hendrik Steel provided substandard materials. What if he was right? What if they deliberately sabotaged the bridge to discredit him, to steal his patents while his reputation was destroyed? The study felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. Emma looked at her mother and saw her own fear reflected back. These documents, Dr. Reyes continued, gesturing at the journals and blueprints, could be worth millions, not just as historical artifacts but as legal evidence. Modern infrastructure still uses concepts pioneered in these designs. If you could prove theft, establish that Aldrich was the true innovator, you could claim derivative rights to patents that generate billions in licensing fees. Josephine sat down heavily in the desk chair. That's not possible. Patents from the 1890s have spawned thousands of derivative patents over the decades. There's legal precedent for historical IP restoration, especially in cases of proven fraud. Dr. Reyes pulled a card from her messenger bag. I know someone, an attorney who specializes in exactly this kind of case. James Yu. He's brilliant, idealistic, and he takes on cases like this pro bono when they interest him. She handed the card to Josephine, who stared at it without speaking. You need to understand what you're facing, Dr. Reyes said, her voice gentle but firm. If you pursue this, Hendrik Global will come after you with everything they have. Legal intimidation, character assassination, threats. They've done it before. They'll do it again. Emma found her voice. But if we don't pursue it, if we just let it go, then Jonathan Aldrich remains a historical footnote, a failed engineer whose bridge killed 12 people. The truth stays buried, and the Hendrik family continues to profit from innovations they stole. Dr. Reyes looked between them. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what the cost will be either way. Josephine stood, moving to where Emma sat. She put her hand on her daughter's shoulder, and Emma felt the slight tremor in her mother's fingers. Why are you helping us? Josephine asked. After what happened to you? Dr. Reyes smiled, but there was no humor in it. Because I'm 62 years old, and I've spent 3 decades knowing the truth but unable to prove it. Because I watched my career die for asking the wrong questions. Because Jonathan Aldrich deserves better than to be remembered as the man who killed 12 people with his arrogance. She moved toward the door, then paused. There's something else. One of Aldrich's journals, I saw it earlier, there was an entry near the end. Something about hiding the truth in the stones. In the bridge foundation itself. Emma felt electricity shoot through her. The bridge? But it's collapsed. It's been condemned for 50 years. The foundations are still there. The support pillars. Dr. Reyes's eyes gleamed with the same intensity Emma felt building in her own chest. If Aldrich hid these documents in the walls of his house, what else might he have hidden in the structure he built? The structure they destroyed his reputation over? After Dr. Reyes left, promising to contact James Yu immediately, Emma and Josephine stood in the study, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. Mom! Emma's voice was small. What are we going to do? Josephine picked up the journal, running her fingers over Jonathan Aldrich's handwriting. When she looked up, there was something in her eyes Emma hadn't seen in months. Not just determination, purpose. We're going to find out what he hid in the stones, Josephine said. And then we're going to decide if the truth is worth fighting for. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows. The bridge ruins stood like a skeleton against the gray sky, holding secrets that had waited more than a century to be discovered. Emma thought about her father's visit, his 2 casual questions, the way his eyes had lingered on the documents. Should we tell Dad? She asked. Josephine's expression hardened. No, not yet. Maybe not ever. And in that moment, Emma understood they'd crossed a line. This wasn't just about historical curiosity anymore. It was about something dangerous, something that had already destroyed one man's life and derailed a historian's career. They were going to chase it anyway. Emma felt fear and excitement warring in her chest, a heady mixture that made her feel more alive than she had in years. Whatever came next, whatever the cost, they were in it together. The bridge house had given them a mystery. Now they had to decide if they were brave enough or foolish enough to solve it. James Yu arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in a 15-year-old Subaru that had seen better decades. He emerged wearing jeans and a slightly wrinkled button-down, carrying a battered leather briefcase that looked like it had survived law school and several years of courtroom battles. He was younger than Josephine had expected, mid-30s, with black-framed glasses and the kind of nervous energy that suggested too much coffee and not enough sleep. Ms. Brown. He approached with his hand extended, his grip firm when she shook it. James Yu. Dr. Reyes sent me your photos. I've been thinking about nothing else for 3 days. There was something disarming about his directness. No pretense, no lawyer's careful verbal dancing. Just genuine excitement barely contained beneath a professional exterior. "Come in," Josephine said. "Though I should warn you, the house isn't exactly—" "I don't care about the house." James was already moving toward the door, his eyes scanning the bridge structure integrated into the walls. "I care about what's inside it." Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, her laptop under one arm. "You're the attorney?" "Guilty. You must be Emma. Dr. Reyes said you're the one who tracked down Grace Aldrich Porter." Emma's eyebrows rose. "How did you?" "I've been doing my own research." James followed Josephine to the study, his briefcase hitting his leg with each step. Oregon genealogical records, cross-referenced with census data and name change filings. Grace Porter, age 83, living in an assisted care facility outside Portland. Born Grace Aldrich, daughter of Margaret Aldrich, granddaughter of Jonathan's daughter Sarah. The line survived, just went underground. He set his briefcase on the desk, popping it open to reveal a chaos of folders and sticky notes. "Before we get into the legal framework, I need to see everything. Every document, every journal entry, every blueprint. Can you walk me through what you found?" The next 2 hours dissolved into a blur of technical discussion. James examined each document with the meticulousness of a surgeon, asking questions that revealed both legal acumen and genuine understanding of engineering principles. He photographed everything with his phone, took handwritten notes in a shorthand Josephine couldn't decipher, and occasionally muttered to himself in what sounded like Korean. "The load distribution algorithms alone," he said, spreading one of the blueprints across the desk. "Modern suspension bridges still use variations of these calculations. If we can prove Aldrich developed them first, that the Hendrick patents filed 2 years after his death were actually stolen from his work." "How much?" Josephine interrupted. "Dr. Reyes mentioned millions, but what are we actually talking about?" James straightened, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Conservatively, 200 to 300 million in settlement value. Licensing fees for derivative technologies, damages for fraud, possibly punitive damages if we can prove the bridge collapse was deliberate sabotage. Hendrick Global generates billions annually from infrastructure patents. Even a small percentage acknowledged as rightfully belonging to Aldrich's estate." He paused. "It could change your life." The number hung in the air like something solid. Emma had gone pale. Josephine felt lightheaded. "But," James continued, his tone shifting, "getting there means proving provenance, establishing theft, surviving the legal onslaught that Hendrick Global will unleash the moment we file. They have a legal department of 80 attorneys. I have me, a paralegal who works part-time, and a lot of student loan debt." "Why would you take this case?" Josephine asked. "Pro bono," Dr. Reyes said. "Why?" James smiled, but there was something sad in it. "Because I became a lawyer to fix injustices, not to help corporations protect their profits. Because cases like this, historical IP restoration, exposing fraud that's lasted over a century, this is why I went to law school. Also because my ex-fiancé, who works for a firm that represents companies like Hendrick, told me I was naive and idealistic and would never make real money doing boutique charity work." He shrugged. Proving her wrong would be satisfying. Before Josephine could respond, she heard a car door slam outside. Through the window, she saw Marcus's BMW pulling into the driveway. "Damn it," she muttered. "Emma, did you tell your father?" "No." Emma was already moving toward the stairs. "I didn't say anything." But Marcus was already at the door, his knock sharp and impatient. Josephine met him in the entry hall, positioning herself to block his view of the study. "Marcus, this isn't your day." "I know. I wanted to surprise Emma." His smile was charming, practiced. "And to see how you're settling in." He was lying. Josephine could tell by the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept moving past her toward the interior of the house. He was looking for something. "We're busy," she said flatly. "Maybe call first next time." "Busy with what?" Marcus's gaze shifted past her shoulder. and Josephine realized too late that James had emerged from the study. "Who's this?" James extended his hand before Josephine could intervene. "James, you, attorney. And you are?" "Marcus Rivera, Emma's father." Marcus shook his hand, his expression shifting to something calculating. "Attorney? Is there a problem with the house purchase?" "Just reviewing some documents," James said smoothly. "Historical property comes with complicated provenance issues." Emma appeared on the stairs, and Marcus's attention shifted immediately. "Hey, kiddo, wanna grab lunch? We could go to that diner in town." Josephine watched her daughter's face cycle through emotions. Longing, suspicion, guilt. Emma glanced at her mother, then back at Marcus. "I can't. We're kind of in the middle of something." "More important than your dad?" Marcus kept his tone light, but Josephine heard the edge beneath it. "I drove all the way from Philadelphia." "You drove from Philadelphia unannounced," Josephine corrected. "Emma has plans." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I'd like to hear that from her." Emma descended the stairs, stopping beside her mother. "Sorry, Dad. Maybe this weekend?" For a moment, Marcus's mask slipped. Josephine saw anger flash across his face, quickly covered. Then he smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Sure. This weekend." He pulled out his phone. "Hey, while I'm here, those documents you mentioned, the historical stuff. I did some research. Aldridge's patents, the bridge design. Pretty fascinating. Must be valuable to collectors." Josephine felt ice slide down her spine. "What kind of research?" "Just curious. You know me. I like to understand what I'm looking at." Marcus's tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. "Found some interesting connections. Did you know Titan's partnering with Hendrick Global on a county infrastructure project? Small world." The study suddenly felt very far away. James had gone still beside her, his lawyer's instincts clearly activated. "That is interesting," James said carefully, "though I'm not sure how it relates to Ms. Brown's property." "Maybe it doesn't." Marcus pocketed his phone. "Or maybe it's the kind of thing that could complicate a simple renovation project. Make it messier than it needs to be." Josephine's hands clenched. "Is that a threat?" "It's concern. For Emma. For you. This house, this whole situation, it feels precarious. Unsafe." He looked at Emma. "If you ever want to stay with us, kiddo, you know you're always welcome." After Marcus left, the three of them stood in silence. Emma spoke first, her voice small. "He knows. Somehow he knows." James pulled out his phone, his expression grim. "Titan Infrastructure Group. Let me check something." His fingers flew across the screen. After a moment, he looked up. "Titan's a subsidiary of Hendrick Global. Has been for 8 years. Your ex-husband doesn't just work with Hendrick. He works for them." Josephine felt the walls closing in. He'll tell them what we found." "Probably already has," James said. "Which means we're on a clock now. We need to file preliminary legal notices, establish public record of your claim before they can suppress it. And we need to search that bridge foundation. If there's more evidence, we need it secured immediately." Through the window, Josephine could see a dark sedan parked across the street. It had been there since yesterday. She'd assumed it was neighborhood surveillance, someone monitoring the condemned property. Now she wasn't so sure. Emma moved beside her mother, taking her hand. "What do we do?" Josephine looked at her daughter, then at James, then at the journal spread across the study desk. She thought about Marcus's warning, about the sedan outside, about everything she'd worked for being reduced to this crumbling house and a decision that could destroy them or save them. "We fight," she said. "We file the papers. We search the bridge. We see this through." James nodded, already pulling documents from his briefcase. "I'll start drafting tonight. We can file by Friday." As he worked, Josephine stood at the window watching the sedan, watching the bridge ruins holding their secrets, feeling the weight of choice pressing down on her shoulders. Marcus knew, which meant Hendrick would know soon, if they didn't already. The clock was ticking. The battle was beginning, and there was no going back now. Josephine discovered the break-in at 6:15 a.m. when she went to her truck for tools. The driver's side window was intact, the door still locked, but someone had jimmied the rear hatch. Her toolbox remained untouched. The emergency kit was still there. But her laptop, the one containing 3 days of photograph documentation, was gone. Her hands shook as she dialed Detective Angela Torres's number. The business card Dr. Reyes had given her crumpled from being carried in her pocket. The call went to voicemail twice before a tired voice answered on the third attempt. Torres, this is Josephine Brown. Someone broke into my truck. They took my laptop. Pause. File a report online. Someone will follow up in 48 hours. You don't understand. The laptop had photographs of historical documents. Evidence of, ma'am, I handle 3 to 4 vehicle break-ins a week. I'm sorry about your computer, but, please. Josephine's voice cracked. Just come look. 5 minutes. Something in her tone must have registered. Torres sighed. Give me your address. 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. Detective Angela Torres emerged looking exactly as tired as she'd sounded. Early 40s, dark hair pulled back, eyes that had seen too much and expected too little. She examined the truck with professional efficiency, taking photos, dusting for prints that probably wouldn't yield anything useful. They knew what they wanted, Torres said finally. Didn't touch the tools, the emergency kit, just the laptop. You back up your files? Some of them. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Torres's expression shifted slightly. What kind of historical documents? Josephine hesitated. How much to reveal? But Torres was watching her with eyes that had already calculated she was hiding something important. Engineering patents from the 1890s. Journals belonging to Jonathan Aldridge, the man who built the bridge. Josephine gestured toward the rusted structure. We think they might be valuable. We think someone doesn't want us to have them. Torres went very still. Aldridge. That name sounds familiar. He designed the suspension bridge. Collapsed in 1891, killed 12 people. No, that's not why I know it. Torres pulled out her phone, scrolling through something. There was a case. Long time ago, before I made detective. Suspicious death ruled suicide. The Vic was researching local history, something about the Hendrick family. She looked up. Aldridge. That was the connection. He was researching Jonathan Aldridge. The morning suddenly felt colder. When? 1998. Guy named Thomas Porter. Drove his car off Route 22 into a ravine. But the scene never sat right with the investigating officer. No skid marks, no evidence of mechanical failure. Just drove straight off the road at 60 miles per hour. Torres's eyes were sharp now, fully awake. They found research materials in his apartment. Historical archives, genealogy records, all focused on the Aldridge family and Hendrick Steel Consortium. Emma had appeared on the porch, wrapped in a blanket. Did you say Porter? Torres turned. You know the name? Grace Aldridge Porter. She's Jonathan Aldridge's great-great-granddaughter. Emma's voice was steady, but Josephine could hear the fear beneath it. We've been in contact with her. Torres looked between them. You two want to tell me what's really going on here? They moved inside, to the kitchen where Josephine had set up a temporary workspace. Over coffee that tasted like regret, they explained everything. The journals, the blueprints, James' used legal assessment, Marcus's connection to Titan and Hendrick Global. Torres listened without interrupting, her expression growing progressively darker. When they finished, she set down her mug. Let me make sure I understand. You've discovered evidence that could expose a century-old corporate conspiracy. You've hired a lawyer to file legal claims. And your ex-husband, who works for the company that would lose billions if you succeed, knows about all of this. Yes, Josephine said simply. And you didn't think to call the police before someone broke into your truck? I didn't think they'd actually... Josephine's voice failed. I thought we had time. Torres stood, moving to the window. The dark sedan was still parked across the street. That car. How long? 2 days. License plate. I didn't think to check. Torres pulled out her radio, calling in the plate number. While she waited for the response, she turned back to them. Thomas Porter was Grace's cousin? Emma nodded. I found the connection in genealogy records. He changed his name from Aldridge to Porter, like the rest of the family. But he was researching their history. He must have found something. The radio crackled. Torres listened, her jaw tightening. Registered to a shell company. Same shell company that owns 3 other vehicles flagged in surveillance operations over the past 5 years. Josephine felt sick. Hendrik? Can't prove it, but I'd bet my pension. Torres pulled out her phone. I'm calling this in. You two need protection. We need to search the bridge foundation, Emma said suddenly, before they stop us. Jonathan Aldridge wrote that he hid the truth in the stones. If there's more evidence, absolutely not. Torres's voice was sharp. That structure is condemned. It's dangerous. So is doing nothing, Josephine countered. Detective, if they killed Grace's cousin in 1998, if they're watching us now, waiting isn't going to make us safer. It's going to give them time to ensure whatever's hidden in that bridge stays hidden. Torres studied her for a long moment. Then she sighed, the sound of someone making a decision against their better judgment. I'll arrange protection, and tomorrow, with proper safety equipment and my direct supervision, we search the bridge. But if I say it's too dangerous, we stop. Understood? Josephine nodded, relief and terror warring in her chest. As Torres left to arrange backup patrol, Emma's phone rang. She answered, listened, then handed it to her mother. It's Grace, from Oregon. Josephine took the phone. Ms. Aldridge Porter? The voice on the other end was thin, elderly, but steady. Thomas was my cousin. They killed him for asking questions. Now they're watching you. I'm booking a flight to Pennsylvania. Someone needs to face this. Someone needs to stop running. After 83 years of hiding, Grace Aldridge Porter was coming home. The bridge foundation loomed in the early morning mist like the skeleton of some prehistoric creature. Detective Torres had insisted on dawn. Fewer witnesses, less chance of interference. She'd brought 2 uniformed officers, safety harnesses, and a structural engineer from the county who looked distinctly unhappy about being there. This is monumentally stupid, the engineer muttered, examining the crumbling concrete pillars. Condemned for 50 years for good reason. One wrong move and the whole thing could shift. Josephine studied the structure with professional detachment, her engineer's training overriding fear. The eastern pillar, the one mentioned in Aldridge's journal, was the most intact. Massive stone blocks formed its base, each one carved with the precision of 19th-century craftsmanship. Above them, rusted iron supports jutted like broken ribs. There. She pointed to a section where the mortar between stones looked different. Newer or at least less weathered. That's been repaired. Recently, relatively speaking. James stood beside her, having insisted on being present despite Torres's objections. Emma and Izzy were filming from a safe distance, Izzy's camera capturing everything with the intensity of someone who understood they were documenting history. Torres handed Josephine a crowbar. You have 30 minutes. Then we're done, evidence or not. The first stone came loose easier than expected. Behind it, a cavity. Josephine's headlamp illuminated the space and the metal case within. Waterproofed, sealed with wax that had hardened over decades. Her hands trembled as she pulled it free. Got something, she called out. James was there immediately, helping her lower the case to the ground. Torres supervised as they carefully broke the wax seal. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, more documents. But these were different. Not journals or blueprints. Letters. Josephine unfolded the first one, her breath catching. The letterhead read Hendrik Steel Consortium, dated March 1891. She read aloud, her voice cutting through the morning silence. The Aldridge situation requires permanent resolution. His refusal to sell the patents leaves us no choice but to demonstrate the inadequacy of his designs. Johnson assures me the substituted materials will perform adequately under normal load but will fail catastrophically under stress. The dedication ceremony provides ideal circumstances. Regrettable but necessary. The words hung in the cold air. Emma had stopped filming, her face pale. James was already photographing the letter with shaking hands. "That's a confession," Torres said quietly. "They deliberately sabotaged the bridge. 12 people died, and it was murder." Josephine's hands moved through the rest of the documents. More letters, engineering reports marked confidential. Correspondence between Hendrick executives discussing patent theft. Plans to discredit Aldrich. A paper trail of conspiracy laid out in fading ink. "This is it," James breathed. "This is everything we need. Proof of fraud, proof of murder, proof that every patent Hendrick claimed was stolen from Aldrich's work." A sound made them all turn. Tyler Bishop stood at the edge of the bridge ruins, camera in hand, that ambitious glint in his eye that Josephine was beginning to recognize as dangerous. "How long have you been there?" Torres demanded. "Long enough." Tyler was already typing on his phone. "Local mom uncovers century-old murder conspiracy. This is national news. Hell, this is international." "You can't publish this," Josephine said, but she could hear the futility in her own voice. "I absolutely can, and will." Tyler looked up from his phone. "Do you have any idea what you've found? This isn't just about you anymore. This is about justice, about truth. People have a right to know." Torres moved toward him. "This is an active investigation. Into a murder from 1891? Good luck enforcing that." Tyler was backing away, still filming. "I'm not breaking any laws. Public property, public interest story." He was gone before Torres could stop him, disappearing into the morning mist like a ghost. Josephine felt something inside her crack. Control. She'd lost control of the narrative, of the discovery, of everything. "Mom!" Emma's voice was small. "What do we do?" Before Josephine could answer, a car pulled up to the bridge entrance. An older woman emerged, moving slowly but with unmistakable determination. Grace Aldrich Porter had arrived. She approached the group, her eyes moving from the bridge ruins to the documents spread on the ground. When she spoke, her voice carried 83 years of buried pain. "That's my great-great-grandfather's handwriting on those blueprints." She knelt beside the metal case, her fingers hovering over the letters without quite touching them. "Thomas died trying to find these. Died because the Hendrick family has spent a century making sure the truth stayed buried." Torres helped her to her feet. "Ms. Aldrich Porter, I need to ask you some questions about your cousin's death. I'll tell you everything I know. Everything I should have told someone decades ago." Grace turned to Josephine and Emma. "But first I need to see it. The house. The place where Jonathan lived. Where he hid these secrets because he knew they'd kill him if he exposed them while he was alive." They made their way back to the bridge house, the metal case secured in Torres's patrol car. James walked beside Josephine, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Tyler's article will be online within the hour," he said quietly. "Once it's public, there's no putting this back in the box." "I know. Hendrick Global will respond. Fast and hard." "I know that too." James stopped walking, turning to face her. "Are you ready for what comes next? Because it's going to get worse before it gets better." Josephine looked at the bridge house, at Emma and Grace walking together toward the entrance, at the ruins of Aldrich's bridge standing as testament to a century-old crime. She thought about Marcus, about the sedan that had been watching them, about Thomas Porter driving off Route 22 because he'd asked too many questions. "No," she admitted. "I'm not ready. But we're doing it anyway." Inside the house, Grace moved through the rooms like a woman visiting a grave. She touched the walls where the journals had been hidden, stood in the study where Jonathan Aldrich had worked, wept quietly when she saw his handwriting preserved in the leather-bound volumes. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew they'd destroy him, but he made sure the truth would survive. 134 years, and it finally has." Torres's phone rang. She answered, listened, her expression darkening. When she hung up, she looked at Josephine with something like pity. "Tyler's article just went live. It's already been picked up by the Associated Press." She paused. You're about to become very famous. And Hendrik Global just issued a statement. They're denying everything and threatening to sue for defamation. Through the window, Josephine could see news vans pulling onto their street. The siege was beginning. Emma moved beside her mother, slipping her hand into Josephine's. Grace stood on her other side. 3 generations of women bound by Jonathan Aldridge's century-old secret. "Let them come," Grace said, her voice stronger than Josephine had heard it. "I've been running for 83 years. I'm done running." The first reporter was already knocking on the door. By noon, their street looked like a disaster zone. News vans lined both sides. Satellite dishes pointed skyward like flowers seeking sun. Reporters camped on the sidewalk, cameras ready, shouting questions whenever anyone approached the house. Josephine had stopped answering the door after the 5th knock. Tyler Bishop's article had gone viral. Hidden fortune. Local mom uncovers $290 million engineering conspiracy was trending on 3 social media platforms. The comments sections were equally divided between support and skepticism, with a disturbing number of people theorizing about government cover-ups and corporate assassinations. Josephine's phone hadn't stopped ringing. Lawyers offering representation. Documentary producers wanting exclusive rights. A man claiming to be Aldridge's descendant demanding his share. She'd stopped answering after the 20th call. The official statement from Hendrik Global Industries arrived via their legal team at 2 p.m. James read it aloud in the kitchen, his voice tight with controlled anger. Hendrik Global Industries categorically denies all baseless allegations contained in recent media reports. The claims represent a transparent attempt to extort money through historical fiction and character assassination. We will vigorously defend our reputation and hold all responsible parties accountable for defamation. They're not even pretending to investigate, Emma said from her position at the window, watching the media circus. Just straight to threats. Grace sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. That's how they've always operated. Deny, intimidate, destroy. It worked for a century. Why change now? A knock on the door. Different from the reporter's insistent pounding, 3 measured raps. Torres entered without waiting for an answer, followed by a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Josephine's truck. "Ms. Brown, this is Richard Hendrick's attorney," Torres said, her expression dark. "He has an offer." The attorney set his briefcase on the counter, pulling out documents. "Mr. Hendrick III, CEO of Hendrik Global Industries, is prepared to offer $5 million for all documents, journals, and blueprints currently in your possession. In exchange, you'll sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement and refrain from making any further public statements." The kitchen went silent. $5 million. More money than Josephine had ever imagined having. Enough to secure Emma's future, pay off every debt, start over somewhere far from this mess. "No," she heard herself say. The attorney's eyebrows rose. "I'd encourage you to consider carefully." I said no. "Ms. Brown, my client is being generous. The alternative is protracted litigation that will consume years of your life and drain whatever resources you have. Hendrik Global has 80 attorneys on staff. How many do you have?" James stepped forward. "1. But I'm enough." The attorney's smile was patronizing. "You're James, you. I've read about your work. Boutique IP restoration, mostly pro bono. You won against Riverside Manufacturing in 2019. Congratulations on that $40,000 settlement. This isn't the same league." "Get out," Josephine said quietly. "Tell Mr. Hendrick his offer is rejected." After the attorney left, the room remained tense. Emma was the first to speak. "Mom, that was $5 million. I know. We could have been done. Safe. We'd never be safe. Not really." Josephine moved to the window, watching the attorney navigate through the reporters. "The moment we sign that NDA, we become complicit. The truth stays buried. Jonathan Aldridge remains a historical footnote, and the Hendrick family keeps profiting from murder and theft." Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, "We need to talk. Now." He arrived 30 minutes later, accompanied by 2 men in suits. The reporters surged forward, cameras flashing, but Marcus pushed through with the confidence of someone used to getting his way. Torres intercepted him at the door. "This is a bad time," she said flatly. "I'm Emma's father. I have a right to see my daughter." "Actually, you don't. Not without scheduling." "Let him in," Josephine said, though her stomach churned. "Let's get this over with." Marcus entered with his lawyers flanking him like bodyguards. He looked tired, his usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled. When he spoke, his voice carried an edge Josephine recognized as stress poorly masked by control. "I'm filing for emergency custody. This situation, the media attention, the threats, people watching the house. It's not safe for Emma. I'm taking her home until this settles down." Emma stood. "I'm not going anywhere. You're 16. You don't get to decide." "Actually," Torres interjected, "she kind of does. Family court judges consider the preferences of teenagers, especially at 16. One of Marcus's lawyers stepped forward. "We have documentation of threats, evidence of surveillance, witness statements about the dangerous condition of this property. Any reasonable judge will grant emergency custody given the circumstances." "You want to know what's dangerous?" Emma's voice was shaking but strong. "Dad working for the company that killed 12 people and covered it up for a century. Dad knowing about the discovery and immediately reporting it to his bosses. Dad choosing his corporate paymasters over his own daughter's safety." Marcus's face went pale. "Emma, I was trying to protect you. By telling Hendrik Global? By helping them prepare their defense before we could even file our legal claim?" Emma moved beside her mother. "I did the research, Dad. The break-in happened the day after you visited. The surveillance started after you asked about the documents. You led them right to us." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Marcus looked between Emma and Josephine, his expression cycling through denial, guilt, and finally anger. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You've turned her against me, filled her head with conspiracy theories and paranoia." He gestured at Grace. "Dragged an elderly woman across the country to validate your treasure hunt. Hired a lawyer who's in over his head. You're not protecting Emma. You're using her to chase money that doesn't exist." "The documents exist," James said quietly. "The evidence exists. And the morning after we discovered it, someone broke into Ms. Brown's truck. Coincidence? Millbrook has crime. Shocking revelation." Marcus turned back to Josephine. "This stops now. I'm giving you one chance. Take the settlement, sign the NDA, and let Emma come stay with us until this blows over. Or I file the custody motion and we do this in court." Josephine felt the weight of the decision pressing down. Emma beside her, watching. Grace across the table, 83 years of running visible in the lines of her face. James standing between her and Marcus's lawyers like a shield made of determination and student loans. Through the window, she could see reporters interviewing neighbors. A news helicopter circled overhead. The dark sedan was gone, replaced by obvious security vehicles that weren't even pretending to be subtle. "File your motion," Josephine said. "We'll see you in court." After Marcus left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, Emma collapsed into a chair. She wasn't crying, but her hands were shaking. "He's really going to try to take me away." Josephine knelt beside her daughter. "He won't succeed." "How do you know?" "Because you're 16 years old, and you have a voice, and any judge worth their degree will listen to what you want." She took Emma's hands. "But Emma, if you want to go with him, if this is too much—" "It's not about too much." Emma's voice was fierce. "It's about what's right. Jonathan Aldridge died believing he was a failure, believing his bridge killed 12 people, believing history would remember him as incompetent. We can change that. We can give him back his name." Grace spoke from across the table, her voice steady. "My whole life I was taught to hide, to never speak the Aldridge name, to pretend we came from nowhere. Thomas tried to change that and they killed him. But you," she looked at Josephine and Emma, "you're not hiding, you're fighting, and I'm too old and too tired to run anymore." That night, After the reporters finally dispersed and Torres arranged for patrol cars to monitor the street, Josephine stood in the study. The journals were spread across the desk, Jonathan Aldridge's handwriting visible in the lamplight. She thought about him, alone in this room, knowing what was coming, hiding his truth in walls and stones because he understood that sometimes justice takes more than one lifetime to achieve. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Hendrick Global stock drops 3% on fraud allegations. 3%. Not much, but enough to prove that people were listening. Enough to prove that truth, once released, was harder to contain than lies. Emma appeared in the doorway. Can't sleep. Too much noise in my head. Yeah, me too. Emma moved beside her mother, looking down at the journals. Do you think we'll win? I don't know, but I think we're on the right side. That has to count for something. Outside, the bridge ruins stood silhouetted against the night sky. Tomorrow would bring more reporters, more lawyers, more pressure. But tonight, in this study where Jonathan Aldridge had worked and dreamed and hidden his truth, two women stood together, refusing to run. The storm was just beginning, but they were still standing. Evelyn's house smelled like old books and chamomile tea. The living room had become their war room. Documents spread across every surface, laptops open, the constant hum of strategy and fear. They'd been there 3 days, leaving the bridge house under Torres's patrol supervision, while the media frenzy continued its relentless cycle. Grace sat in the armchair by the window, her hands folded in her lap with the stillness of someone who'd spent a lifetime waiting. My grandmother used to say the Hendrick name was a curse, that speaking it aloud invited trouble. I thought she was being dramatic. Old world superstition. Her voice cracked. Then Thomas died, and I understood she was just telling the truth in the only way she could. Evelyn poured more tea, her hands steadier than they'd been in days. I need to confess something. Part of me wants this so badly. The vindication, the proof I was right 30 years ago, that I might be pushing you toward danger. My judgment might be compromised by my own need for redemption. Josephine looked at the woman who'd become their mentor, seeing the vulnerability beneath the academic armor. You think we should stop? I think I can't be objective about what you should do. My wanting doesn't make it right. Before anyone could respond, Josephine's phone rang. A known number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her press accept. Ms. Brown, this is Richard Hendrick. The voice was smooth, educated, carrying authority tempered with something that sounded almost like exhaustion. I'd like to meet with you, privately. Just the two of us, no lawyers, no media. Please. James was shaking his head violently. Emma looked terrified. But Josephine heard something in Hendrick's voice that made her pause. Why? Because I've spent the last week learning things about my family that I wish I didn't know. And because I think there might be another way forward. One that doesn't destroy everyone involved. Against every piece of advice her team offered, Josephine agreed to meet him. Detective Torres's call came at 7:43 a.m., her voice carrying an urgency that made Josephine's stomach drop before she'd even spoken. Grace's cousin Thomas. The 1998 death. It wasn't suicide. Josephine sat up in Evelyn's guest bed, her heart already racing. You're sure? I pulled the original case file. There were inconsistencies the investigating officer noted but never followed up on. No skid marks at the scene, no mechanical failure, but traces of sedatives in his system that the toxicology report minimized. And get this, 2 days before he died, he'd filed a motion with the county clerk. Historical patent claim against Hendrick Steel Consortium, citing newly discovered evidence. What happened to the claim? Died with him, and the lawyer who filed it, a guy named Robert Chun from Philadelphia, disappeared 3 weeks later. Never found. His office was cleaned out, his files gone. His family reported him missing, but the investigation went nowhere. Josephine's hands were shaking. You're saying Hendrick killed them both. I'm saying someone did. And whoever it was had the resources to make it look like accidents, to make evidence disappear, to ensure no one looked too closely. Torres paused. I've been getting pressure from above to drop this. City officials with Hendrick connections suggesting I'm wasting resources on ancient history. but I reopened the investigation officially this morning, which means you need to be extremely careful. After she hung up, Josephine found Grace in the kitchen, already dressed despite the early hour. The old woman took one look at her face and knew. "Thomas," she said quietly. "They killed him. Detective Torres has evidence. He was filing a patent claim. 2 days later, he was dead." Grace's teacup rattled against its saucer. For a long moment, she said nothing. When she spoke, her voice was hollow. "I thought he gave up. Thought the shame of our family history finally broke him. I believed that for 26 years. Tears tracked down her weathered cheeks. He was murdered for trying to do exactly what we're doing now." Emma appeared in the doorway, James behind her. "What happened?" Josephine explained while making coffee she didn't want but needed. The kitchen filled with a heavy silence broken only by the coffee maker's gurgle. James was the first to speak. "If Torres officially reopened the investigation, it becomes part of the public record. We can use it, evidence of a pattern of violence to suppress the truth. Or it makes us the next targets," Emma said quietly. No one contradicted her. At 9 a.m., Josephine's phone rang. Richard Hendrick III, calling from a number that wasn't blocked this time. "Ms. Brown, I've just been informed about the 1998 investigation. I need you to know I had no idea. I was 26 years old, working in Dubai, nowhere near company operations." His voice was strained. "But I've been going through archives. My father's correspondence from that period. There are gaps. Files that should exist but don't. Meetings with no minutes." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying my father might have known, might have been involved." A long pause. "I'm opening our historical archives to you. Complete access. Every document from 1890 to 2000. If there's proof my family committed murder to hide the truth, I want it found." James grabbed the phone from Josephine's hand. "Mr. Hendrick, this is James. What you're proposing would be career suicide. Your board would remove you. Your family would disown you." "Why?" "Because I looked at my children this morning and realized I don't want them growing up in a legacy built on lies and murder. Because I've been reading Jonathan Aldridge's journals. Yes, I obtained copies. And he was a better engineer than my great-great-grandfather ever was. Because the right thing to do shouldn't be this complicated." Hendrick's voice cracked. "I'll testify. Against my own company if necessary. I'll help you expose everything. But I have one condition." "What condition?" Josephine had taken the phone back, her mind reeling. "Part of any settlement goes toward establishing an engineering ethics foundation. Aldridge's name and Hendrick's name together. Acknowledging the crime, seeking redemption through education. Making sure this never happens again." After the call ended, they sat in stunned silence. Grace was the first to move, standing and walking to the window. "He wants to buy absolution," she said flatly. "Thinks putting both names on a building erases a century of theft and murder. Or he genuinely wants to make amends," Emma countered. "People can change. People can be horrified by what their families did. Can they? Or is this just another way to control the narrative, to seem noble while protecting the empire?" Evelyn spoke up, her voice measured. "The foundation would do real good. Scholarships, research grants, ethical oversight. It's more than just a name on a building." "But it lets the Hendrick family off the hook," Grace insisted. "They destroyed Jonathan, killed Thomas, probably killed that lawyer. And now they get to be heroes?" James was typing frantically on his laptop. "Actually, this could be perfect. With Hendrick's testimony and archive access, we have everything we need for the civil case. The criminal investigation proceeds separately. If there's evidence of murder, the FBI handles that. Hendrick Global pays restitution, admits fraud, funds the foundation. Justice gets served even if it's not perfect justice." "Perfect justice would be them in prison," Emma said. "Perfect justice is impossible when the people who committed the original crimes are dead." James looked up. "This is messy justice, complicated justice, but it's still justice." Josephine's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Emergency custody hearing scheduled. Friday 2 p.m. Hope you have a good lawyer. The threat landed like a physical blow. Everything else, the archives, the foundation, Richard Hendrick's crisis of conscience, suddenly felt distant compared to the immediate danger of losing Emma. He's using the danger as proof I'm unfit, Josephine said, her voice barely above a whisper. Using the threats we're facing because of his company's crimes to take my daughter away. Torres's response was immediate when Josephine called. I'll testify. I'll explain that Marcus's employer is the source of the danger. But Josephine, you need to understand, judges are unpredictable. If Marcus's lawyers paint a picture of chaos and risk, if they emphasize Emma's safety over everything else. She didn't need to finish. Josephine understood. The fight for justice might cost her everything that mattered. Friday arrived like an execution date. The courtroom was smaller than Josephine had imagined, more intimate. Marcus sat with his lawyers, his expression carefully neutral. His new wife was there too, young and polished, the life Josephine used to have reflected back at her like a mirror to a different timeline. The judge was a woman in her 50s, her expression suggesting she'd heard every custody argument imaginable and believed none of them. Marcus's lawyer went first, painting a picture of danger and instability. The media circus, the threats, the condemned house, the obsessive pursuit of a fortune that might not exist. He made Josephine sound reckless, selfish, willing to endanger her daughter for money. Then it was Emma's turn to testify. She walked to the stand with her shoulders back, wearing the dress Josephine had bought her for 8th grade graduation. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady. My father thinks he's protecting me, but he's the reason we're in danger. He works for Hendrick Global. He told them about the discovery. The surveillance started after his visit. The break-in happened the day after he asked about the documents. Emma looked directly at Marcus. He chose his company over his family. Again. Marcus's face went white. His lawyer tried to object, but Emma continued. My mom bought a terrible house with the last money she had because she was trying to give us a future. She didn't know what we'd find. But when we found it, she didn't walk away even when it got dangerous. Because she taught me that some things are worth fighting for. That truth matters. That justice isn't just about what's convenient. Emma's voice strengthened. I'm 16 years old. I know what I want. I want to stay with my mother. I want to finish what we started. And I want my father to understand that being safe isn't the same as being protected. The judge asked questions about school, about friends, about whether Emma felt afraid. Emma answered honestly. Yes, she was scared sometimes. Yes, the media attention was overwhelming. But no, she didn't want to leave her mother. No, she didn't think her father's house was the answer. When Grace testified about generational trauma, about Thomas's death, about the cost of silence, the courtroom went completely still. Torres's testimony was clinical and damning. She explained the timeline, the connections, the evidence that Hendrick Global was the source of the threats Marcus claimed to be protecting Emma from. The judge took 20 minutes to decide. When she returned, her expression was unreadable. Custody remains with Ms. Brown. However, this case will be reviewed in 60 days. If circumstances haven't improved, if the danger hasn't diminished, we'll revisit this decision. She looked at Marcus. Mr. Rivera, your concern for your daughter is noted. But your employer's connection to the threats against her family is also noted. I suggest you examine your priorities carefully. Outside the courthouse, Emma collapsed against Josephine. They stood there, holding each other, while reporters shouted questions neither of them answered. James's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression transforming from cautious to something like wonder. That was Richard Hendrick. The FBI just raided Hendrick Global headquarters. Based on the archival evidence, they're opening a formal investigation into obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and possible accessory to murder. 3 executives from the 1990s have been arrested. The implications hung in the air. This was bigger than a civil case now. This was criminal. This was real. Grace spoke quietly. Thomas would have wanted this. Not revenge. Truth. Josephine looked at the courthouse, at the reporters, at Emma beside her and James and Grace and Torres forming a circle of unlikely allies. They'd survived the reckoning. Barely. but they'd survived. The question was, what came next? 3 months later, the settlement was announced. $290 million split between Josephine and Grace. Public admission of fraud. The Aldrich Hendrick Engineering Ethics Foundation funded in perpetuity. Several Hendrick executives from the 1990s were indicted. Richard Hendrick III resigned as CEO, dedicating himself to the foundation's creation. Marcus's custody bid failed completely when evidence emerged he'd leaked information to Titan, endangering Emma for corporate advantage. Josephine restored the Bridge House, transforming it into a museum dedicated to Jonathan Aldrich's work. She established scholarships for women and minority engineers. Emma began writing a book about Aldrich's life, processing trauma through storytelling. James and Josephine's relationship evolved slowly, carefully, into something real. The dedication ceremony drew hundreds: engineering students, historians, Aldrich descendants. Grace spoke, publicly reclaiming her family name after 83 years. The final moment came at the unveiling of a new pedestrian bridge built using Aldrich's original designs. Josephine and Emma walked across it together, past connecting to future, secrets revealed creating bridges instead of chasms. Justice achieved. Not perfect, but real. The truth, painful as it was, had become the foundation for authentic life. They were finally home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.